Welcome to the Whiskey Vault.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Rex. He's a level 3 whiskey sommelier. I am on the verge.
He is on the path.
On the verge of regaining my moochie glory. All right, this is a whiskey. What do we
Yes, this is actually Jefferson's Presidential Select, 16 years old.
Okay. Jefferson's, they have a lot of different lines coming out of it. Okay.
Yep. So what happened with this one with Jefferson was when they first got into the business of sourcing interesting whiskey, they managed, this is back in the 90s, actually it's back 97, before you graduated, you were in high school. At the time, it was easier to get some old casks because there hadn't yet been an explosion in demand for craft whiskey, right? Yeah. So they were able to get some really old barrels, and they used those to start releasing old whiskey. 18, 25-year-old, right? So this is the Presidential Select.
I like that collar. You see that collar? It's got like a metal...
Isn't it cool?
Crest. Yeah.
So I did this because next in history we're talking about old bourbon. It can be argued, other than making the whiskey, the biggest influencer of the history of bourbon in American history in the mid-1900s was Louis Rosenstyle. Now, he owned Schenley, which was one of the only bourbon distilleries allowed to make whiskey during Prohibition, among other things.
For medicinal purposes.
Yeah. Now remember, originally back in the 1800s, whiskey was just a new make thing. They put it in barrels to ship it. Right. It started tasting pretty good. So at around 1864, the bonding period, which means you don't have to pay taxes on it until it's sold, right? You can, which allowed people to age things. Yeah. Right. If you have to pay taxes as soon as you make it, then aging it is not a cost-effective measure because you can't sell it. So bonding period increasing allowed people to age whiskey without having to pay taxes until they bottled it. Okay. So in 1864, the bonding period is 3 months. You're allowed 3 months of aging. That's it. Then you have to pay taxes. Yeah. So the common thing is, let's release it at 3 months because we got to pay taxes now.
It's like 2 months and 29 days.
Yeah. Then in 1868, 4 years later, it was increased to 1 year. Okay, you get 1 year. You get 1 year to age your whiskey, then you got to pay the government. Then in 1879, it was increased to 3 years, and now we start getting into the category of like bourbon flavors that we know now. Yeah. Right? Yeah. 3 years old is halfway in the middle of the straight age statement 2 and the 4 no need for an age statement. Right. And then in 1894, we still haven't even gotten into the 20th century yet. It's increased to 8 years. Oh. And so that's that early on that bourbon was being aged. Sure. In bonding.
8 years is a pretty well-aged bourbon.
Now, there's a great story about this, but let's talk about Presidential Select really quick.
Depending on where it's being aged, even 3 years can get you some really complex flavors. On the nose, man, these are classic bourbon flavors.
They really are. There's no weird variances. It's just straight up, slight barrel spice, little oakiness, a little bit of cherry. And
at 16 years old, this is one of the things that old whiskeys, especially in warmer climates, have to, guard against, and that's the over-oaking.
I haven't tasted it yet. Is it over-oaked on the taste?
No. And this is kind of blowing my mind because 16 years.
Oh my God.
How do they get 16 years out of this?
That's so good.
And not have it be too oaky?
So there are different warehouses in Kentucky that are famous for like sweet spots, and there are distilleries that will actually shift barrels to keep them balanced as they age. Yeah. Right? So instead of like, this barrel's always in the bottom of the warehouse and these are always at the top and then we blend them later, they'll actually take barrels at the top and move them down to the bottom. As a matter of fact, I think that was a habit, if I remember correctly, of Maker's Mark. And then some are made out of brick, and some are made out of wood, and there's different climates. Some are steam heated during the winter to keep more of an even temperature profile so they don't get overly pushed in and out of the wood. Yeah. So this is just a sweet spot bourbon, man.
This is a phenomenal representation of a super classic bourbon. Brown sugar, honey, bit of apple, and then a very, very present, almost a maraschino cherry. So the barrel note is there. It's not like, there's zero barrel bitterness. It's there, but the on the finish, the little ding of that barrel note that you get, that's the kind of ding that you're getting out of bourbons that are like 3 and 4 years old.
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's an Orphan Barrel series where Diageo started tracking down what they called orphan barrels, which were barrels that they'd sort of been lost track of and didn't fit in any of the release profiles.
Yeah.
Our version of a unicorn barrel is a unicorn barrel for that, right? They call them orphan barrels.
Okay.
And there were some people who thought it was just a marketing shtick, but the thing is, it is real. It's real to have a distillery have barrels that sort of just go off profile, but everyone loves. And then they get set aside. It's also very common for...
we're building an entire series out of
that's
people.
that's a whole business model for us. So that
part of it.
It's also very common to find in a huge warehouse, one barrel here or a barrel there, sort of getting lost in the mix.
Yeah.
And then later you find, this happened in Japan actually, that's how they discovered...
Oh, the Mizunara oak?
Yeah, that's how they discovered that Mizunara oak worked, because they didn't think it was working, so they just set the barrel aside, came back in 20 years, and all of a sudden it was great.
Right.
So...
It only takes 20 years.
Now, the volume that's coming out of orphan barrels, that's up for debate, right?
Yeah.
But essentially the orphan barrels are Diageo releasing random different things from distilleries that they own that are weird one-offs. And what I have found with most of those is that when you get to the old ones, like Whoop and Holler, which I think was Dickel, and I'm going from memory, so I might be wrong. And you get to these lost profit, these older whiskeys. Yeah. My experience is that most of them are over oaked and a little too barrel heavy, and a little too bitter. And this Presidential Select is none of those things.
Yeah. So in the moment you're still talking about historical things, and I took a sip, and every once in a while I'll get into a bourbon that reminds me, this is why bourbon is a thing. Yeah. Because I gotta be honest, more often than not, I'm annoyed that the bourbon category has a new white oak requirement, because it just gives this...
It homogenizes things.
It homogenizes things, and it gives this barrel intense, almost like just a bitter ding in a lot of bourbons out there. It's like, gosh, if I can just get rid of that barrel bitter ding, this could be phenomenal. But this thing, straight up and down, classic bourbon, 16 freaking years old.
There is at the ending that barrel dryness.
I'm saying, but that's that barrel dryness.
It's dry though, not quiet to astringent.
And that's the kind of stuff that I'm finding in like 3 and 4 year old bourbons. It's like, when you're working with something that is brand new and it has to work through that fresh wood astringency.
Can you imagine when they opened these barrels and realized they were this good? They're like, all right, guys, here's the thing.
So
this, by the way, is
a
twin oak for 5 years.
Right.
Batch 1, bottle 5,647.
So could there be, I'm thinking out loud, could there be a tipping point in a bourbon aging process to where the first handful of years you're pulling this astringent barrel bitterness out of there, but
then you've maxed out.
At a certain point, it says, okay, I'm just getting older and older and older, and that barrel bitter kind of plateaus, but all of these other flavors are evolving and maturing to come up to this balancing point.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely possible. Yeah. Now, enjoy the bourbon while I tell you this badass story of Louis Rosenstyle.
Okay.
Right. Now, here's the cool thing about this dude in general.
Yeah.
When World War II hit...
You told me to enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. I didn't pour you enough. When World War II hit, he actually paid the salaries of all of his workers who went to war to their families while they were gone.
Such a bro.
Right?
Yeah.
He also figured out how to convert the majority of their stills into fuel production with a few modifications. And he took that information that was patented, by the way, and offered it for free to the entire whiskey industry so that everybody could help convert distillery to fuel production for the war.
47%.
Could have made money off of that. Instead just said, hey, we figured out how to do this thing. Here you guys go. We can all do it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Can I say a quick thing?
Yeah.
Just to be annoyed and ruin everybody's day. I think there's still people like that today.
Adam ruins everything.
I think there are still people like that today, but I think all of the bandwidth of what we hear stories about are going to be the assholes who try and take advantage.
Yes.
It's like, no, there's solid people, there's great people, there's amazing people, there's generous people.
The vast
people
majority.
that get all of the attention are the assholes that...
But that's true of all things, right? It's always the assholes who get this press, right? So in general, the further we get into the whiskey industry, the more awesome people we meet. Just across the board.
By and large.
Yeah, but there's always an percentage.
There you go.
Okay, so he was a part of this original post-prohibition group of people who were actually had whiskey to sell once prohibition ended.
Yeah.
Right? And so now they're selling whiskey, and they had a head up on everybody else. It killed the small distiller movement in America. Prohibition did. So they have a leg up on everybody. Right? And they're all trying to get laws passed and protect real whiskey.
Right.
And so what happened was there was a huge shortage of whiskey during World War II.
Yeah.
Right? And so the Korean War shows up.
Okay.
Right? Remember the Korean War, and a lot of people thought the Korean War was going to be the next World War III.
Okay.
Because you had China and Korea, and it's like, oh crap, here we go again.
Right.
Right? So he said, we had a shortage during World War II. We're about to have World War III. I'm going to ramp up whiskey production to make sure that we can meet the demands of whiskey during World War III. Well, it never happened. The Korean War just sort of ended.
Well, yeah.
Right?
So he's ramping up production like
So
crazy.
he ramped the crap out of production, and all of a sudden he's sitting on thousands of barrels
Right.
that are reaching the point where their bonding is over.
Right.
But there's no demand.
Yeah.
And so he's like, hey guys, he says to the other guys, this is a direct quote, by the way. Hey guys, we need to increase the bonding period from 8 years up. And everybody else had not ramped up production, so their response was, no, f*** you, that's your problem. And even though it would have benefited them,
right,
they were all afraid that he had all the stocks of old whiskey, and so changing the rules would only benefit him, and so they cut off their nose to spite their face.
Short-term thinking, yeah.
So he left that group and founded his own advocacy arm, and it was called the Distilled Spirits Institute. So he left that one. He's like, fine, I'll just advocate myself. He starts a whole new thing, successfully gets a clause in the Forland bill passed that increases the bonding age from 8 years to 20 years, right?
Right.
Totally without their help, just bam. He also helps get bourbon named the national spirit.
He took his ball and went home.
Yeah. He also helps get bourbon named the national spirit, which immediately ramps up demand of bourbon, and now he's the only one with aged stock.
Right.
And exactly what they were all afraid of happens. He floods the market with aged stock. They can't keep up.
Right.
And he's so successful that by the time you get to 1973, they've consumed all the other advocacy groups he has. They've all gone like, if we can't beat him, let's join his.
Yeah.
So he absorbs the Bourbon Institute and the beverage industry, licensed beverage industry, and they become Discus. And Discus is the current modern liquor advocacy group, foremost in America, really.
Right on.
And that's a product of the early days of Shinley going, all right, everybody.
Yeah. I think I've discovered the secret to enjoying the illegitimate Daniel month.
16-year-old bourbon?
No. Pour at the beginning of the damn episode.
Yeah.
Don't make me listen to stories before you pour anything. Mm-hmm. Just right at the beginning. Bam! And then we're in it.
But that's good. That's a good story, right?
That's a good story.
All right.
Never get in the way of an intelligent and ambitious person who also is like a solid dude.
Yeah,
man.
which makes it hard for anyone else to hate him, which means finding people to arm against him is going to be tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, no more.
Yeah, it's 16 minutes. So sorry.
Sorry, Chad.
Yeah.
We're just fighting, stealing, and drinking.
If you fight me, I fight for a friend.
If you steal, may you steal a lover's heart.
And if you drink, may you drink with us.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us in the Whiskey Vault. Don't forget to throw in a like, hit that subscribe button on the bottom right, and drop a question or comment down below.